Hey, it's time for another episode of the Dubscast, the video incarnation of the best, dare I say, independent sports blog on the web, Dubsism.wordpress.com. You'll find lots of things there that you can't find at ESPN, Sports Illustrated, mental institutions, lots of fun places. Today's episode of the Dubcast, we're gonna talk about Minnesota Viking fans and how they really gotta stop this whining about losing Percy Harvin to the Seahawks. I mean, if for no other reason, the Seahawks have demonstrated that they love to take overrated, for our English-speaking friends, overrated Viking receivers and give them way too much money. I mean, Sidney Rice already blazed this trail, so to that end, I'm gonna show Viking fans 5 crucial numbers about why they shouldn't be so worried about losing Percy Harvin. The first number I want to show you is number 28, okay? The reason why this number is important is not a contractual thing, it's not a statistical thing, it's the guy who wears this number in purple, okay? I don't know if Viking fans realize this, but your offense is this guy, okay? We're not going to mention any names. If you're a Viking fan, you know who this guy is. It all comes down to one thing. When opposing defensive coordinators are getting ready to play the Vikings, they're not sweating Jerome Simpson, and they're not sweating Kyle Rudolph or Jerome Felton or any of those guys. They sweat this guy. So as long as you still have him, that's your offense. That's the engine that drives the purple wherever they're going to go. Harvin is a non-factor as long as you have this guy. Okay. Specific to Harvin, let's start talking about some numbers that really pertain to him. And the first one that I like, because frankly, I think wide receivers in general are overrated. There's right now in the NFL, there's probably about 4 wide receivers that are worth their weight in spam, and the rest of them are interchangeable. And by interchangeable, I mean really not relevant. A good example of this is all the hand-wringing that's going on with Patriots fans over Wes Welker. Well, you know, when the Patriots are looking at a guy like Danny Amendola, who's always hurt, doesn't put up any numbers, and is basically just a possession receiver, when they think that he's the replacement, that tells you that wide receivers aren't that important, despite all the gaudy numbers Welker put up with the Patriots. But in terms of wide receivers, the number to pay attention to is the number 9. That number represents the number of wide receivers in the Hall of Fame who won Super Bowls. And other than tight ends in the modern era, because there's just not very many of them in the Hall of Fame, that number 9 is the lowest of any position. And the 9 guys, and this is where it gets interesting when you look at the 9 guys. There's Fred Biletnikoff, Bob Hayes, Michael Irvin, Don Maynard, Art Monk, Jerry Rice, John Stallworth, Lynn Swann, Paul Warfield. Now, out of that list of guys, there's only 2 that anybody under the age of 35 even ever heard of, and that's Michael Irvin and Jerry Rice. I mean, if you're under the age of 30, you never heard of Fred Biletnikoff or Bob Hayes or Paul Warfield. And you maybe saw Lynn Swann on something you saw on NFL Network once, but you know, it gets even better if you start looking at the guys that you want to talk about as future Hall of Famers, or, you know, guys that dominated the NFL when the under 30 crowd were watching it. And, you know, I'm just going to mention a couple of guys, and you know, these guys are all basically going to be in the Hall of Fame or have a really good shot. And you know, count up the number of rings in this group, okay? Number 1, Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald's career is kind of in the middle. He's got a shot to win if he gets out of Arizona. But as long as he stays at a Cardinal, he's not winning anything. The big one, Terrell Owens. Here's a guy that's going to be in the Hall of Fame, like him or not. He's got some of the biggest numbers ever put up by a wide receiver, except that number for Super Bowl rings. Here's a name that's really going to drive you Viking fans crazy, but Randy Moss. He's second to Terrell Owens in the under 30 guy era. Again, he's a bagel on Super Bowl rings. Here's another thing for Viking fans. Let's talk about Chris Carter. Okay, here's a guy that just got in the Hall of Fame. Here's a guy that you campaigned to get in the Hall of Fame for years. How many Super Bowls he win? Okay, wide receivers are not that important. They're nice to have, but you got to have a quarterback first. And that's the whole reason why wide receivers aren't that important. Because for a wide receiver to be anything, you have to have a quarterback that can get him the ball, and then you have to have an offensive line who can keep that quarterback on his feet. And if you've got an offensive line and a quarterback, chances are you can win anyway without a zillion-dollar wide receiver. So, again, they're overrated. Percy Harvin's just a really overrated guy in a really overrated class. We'll bear that out a little bit more later, okay? This one is going to help with that. Okay? 5, 61.1, and 18 million. Okay, what's that number represent? That number represents Percy Harvin's average touchdowns per season, his receiving yards per game, and the salary cap hit that the Seattle Seahawks just signed up to get him. Okay, $18 million over 2 years. That's what he counts against their $20 million or their $120 million salary cap. I mean, that's almost that's way too big of a percentage for a wide receiver. Okay, and that's any wide receiver. But look at it in terms of this. Okay, 5 touchdowns, 61.1 yards a game. Okay, 5 touchdowns a season. Okay, that means that the Seahawks, for that statistic, just gave, they just signed up to a bigger salary cap hit than the Arizona Cardinals are paying in guaranteed money to Larry Fitzgerald, who, by the way, his stats compared to Harvin's, 8.5 touchdowns a season, 74.4 receiving yards per game. That's also what the Seahawks are committed to in salary cap numbers now. That's more money than Detroit guaranteed Calvin Johnson. And his numbers, compared to Harvin's, are more like 9 touchdowns per season and 85.2 receiving yards per game. Yeah. Harvin didn't come anywhere close to that. He's not gonna come anywhere close to that. He wanted big money. The Vikings found a sucker who were willing to give up a first-round pick to give him big money. You ought to be happy with that. You really dodged a salary cap bullet unloading this guy. Not to mention, I mean, my personal feeling is that this guy's going to be out of the league in 4 years because, well, he's always hurt, which brings us to our next number. 1 out of 4. That's how many games Percy Harvin's missed in his entire career as a Viking. Since 2009, 1 out of every 4 games, 1 out of every 4, Harvin is not on the field for assorted migraines, hangnails, knee injuries, yeah, you name it. The guy's always hurt. And even when he's not hurt, you look at him and you say, gee, is this guy an every down player? Not really. Is this guy really committed to the team? You could question that up until a few days before the trade, and he said, I don't want to be here anymore. Well, by the way, when a guy says that, get rid of him, because he's checked out. He's not going to do anything for you anymore. There's no point in hanging on to him and chasing the dream. Just find somebody who wants to take your headache, get what you can, move on. The Vikings did that, and frankly, the fact that they got a number 1 pick out of it, I think that they did themselves more favors than they can possibly imagine. And then here's the last big number on Percy Harvin, and a lot of Viking fans don't want to remember this, and I'll just put it out there, and that is the number 4, okay? And that's the number of games Percy Harvin's gonna miss when the league finally catches up to him and he gets that drug suspension that we've all been waiting for. Look at him. Remember back when he was coming into the league, coming in for the combines? I mean, here's a guy who knows he's going to get drug tested and nevertheless gets caught hot anyway. All right? So he's managed to behave himself for the last couple of years, or should I say he's managed to not get caught. But the word is out on this guy. I mean, he's a drug suspension, or worse yet, a criminal possession charge just waiting to happen. And, well, I don't really care if a guy smokes a little weed. Big deal. I don't give a damn. But the NFL does. And the NFL is the opinion whose matters here. When Harvin gets caught, it's just a matter of time. And when he gets caught, this is not going to help the other number of 1 out of 4 games missed. And it's also going to, once you start getting that guy who's getting arrested and getting himself in trouble, and, then all of a sudden here comes the NFL baggage machine, thanks to ESPN and the rest of the media and blah, 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 blah. What it all comes down to, when you go through all these numbers that I've just talked about, if you're a Viking fan, yeah, I get Percy Harvin was an exciting player, and, I get that, he played for you in an era when there just really wasn't a lot of things about Viking football to get excited about, but at the end of the day, the question is, does the fact that a guy is exciting make him good? And if it makes him good, does it make him worth big-time cash? I think the answer to both those questions is no. And I think that Viking fans ought to be very grateful that they managed to unload this guy, got a first-round pick, and have probably dodged a couple of real major headaches. Disagree with me? Well, that's what God made the comment section for. So, if you're a Viking fan, don't like what you just heard, give me a ring, give me a call, drop me a line, dubsism.wordpress.com. It's the web. You can find it. Short of that, just stop your whining about Percy Harvin. Be thankful you got the draft pick and move on. And with that, that's going to wrap up another episode of the Dubcast, and we'll be talking to you again soon.